On today's Locked On Marlins, what are some storylines that are flying under the radar?
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Marlins. I'm your host, Jeremiah Geiger. I'm a diehard Marlins fan, and I've podcasted about the team for the last 4 seasons. You can find me on Twitter at Jeremiah Geiger too, and thank you for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let me know your thoughts and leave a like as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. And joining today's show is Ely Sussman from Fish on First, founder over there, and actually the guy who started helping me out getting into my podcasting career a few years back. So, Ely, great to talk to you again. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Surprisingly busy for the fact that the Marlins season is already over. But yeah, just like you, it's kind of a year-round thing for me and my whole group to cover this team. Always excited to be on with you, and I know I've got a fresh set of topics to cover. So yeah, got a lot to say, but I'll try to be concise. I'll try to keep it tighter than I usually do on my own live streams.
I'm excited for this one. We're gonna jump right into it. We're gonna talk about under the radar storylines, whether that's from the 2025 season. Obviously, the biggest was, Kyle Stowers. Were they going to trade Sandy Alcantara? We get that. And we've talked about that plenty on both of our respective platforms. But we're going to talk about things that catches our eye as everyday watchers of this team and know the ins and outs of this organization to a, good extent. How will that affect 2026? And so that's going to be the topic in the first segment. And I'm going to open up the floor to you first, Ely. Is there any storyline that you're kind of dialed into right now that the majority of the fan base doesn't really think about?
This is a good idea because it kind of boggles my mind that this player has slipped to under the radar status. But I am really diving into Eury Perez and the season that he had and the future that he had. A guy that was maybe the best pitching prospect in baseball at the time of his debut, and the hype was certainly there when he returned from Tommy John in June. The overall numbers this year a little bit bloated, and it was up and down, where he had some of the most dominant outings of the entire year for the Marlins pitching staff, and also a handful of clunkers in there that inflated the overall numbers. And one thing I was diving into is the ways that I think he did get significantly better from his rookie year to this year, from 2023 to 2025. Aside from getting all of his velocity back and then some, in addition to expanding his pitch mix, adding yet another breaking ball, adding a sweeper in addition to the slider he already had. What stuck out to me, I think I'm going to put a piece on Fish on First about it, is how basically the entire difference in his ERA going from the low threes to the low fours had to do with the sequencing of when he was allowing his hits, because he was just as unhittable this year as he was in his rookie season. And so much of it was the fact that as a rookie, he was locking guys down with runners on base. And this year, he was really good with the bases empty, and things would snowball on him with runners on base. And to me, like, the more I'm trying to slice into it, I don't think there's much in there other than going from some good luck to some bad luck. And when even though the results themselves didn't really wow people, certainly Sandy was top of everybody's mind when it comes to this rotation. The breakout of Edward Cabrera finally putting things together relative to his previous seasons, that absorbed a lot of the oxygen as well. And I feel like Eury went under the radar for a guy that I still pretty adamantly believe has the highest ceiling out of all these pitchers moving forward, even including guys in the farm system right now. I don't think we're going to talk on more later on about the pitching staff as a whole. And to me, he is still the crown jewel of this organization, and somebody that I think could take a massive step to true stardom as soon as next season.
Do you view Eury Perez as a future Cy Young winner? Because I think he's going to win one at some point in his career.
I think that is a possibility for him. I don't want to put that expectation on him, because that's kind of the ceiling for any players, to be basically the best pitcher in the league. from the beginning, what he's been doing so well since he was a teenager, the fact that he's been able to have such good control for a guy of his size, there's just very little precedent for it for a guy that is 6'8", and most people around him think that that kind of undersells him. He's usually closer to 6'9", and for him to be able to throw strikes at an above average level with all of his pitches, and in particular his fastball quality, the combination of velo and spin that he gets with that pitch, on top of the way that he's able to command it, that kind of opens up the door for everything else. Where it's a pretty simple formula that works against a lot of different opponents as long as he is consistent with his delivery. So yeah, I think really highly of him. You don't know when exactly he's going to hit that ceiling. For some guys, it's 23, like he's coming up on. For Edward Cabrera, example, it took him until 27 to put together his best season of his career. Those are just a couple examples. You hope that he hits that ceiling while he's still a Marlin. Even that is not
Yeah.
totally. The thing is, he's on track to reach free agency after his age 26 season or so. So it's, you just don't know exactly when he's going to put it all together. But I do feel the guys they have in place on the player development and coaching side now, putting their brains together, I think they have a really good idea about how to harness, especially on the pitching side, how to harness those guys' abilities and put together in the best combination so that the results actually show up in a way that I think it's possible as soon as next year that he's going to take a big step forward.
That would be huge for a team coming off of a 17-win improvement to have Eury for an entire season and him to be healthy and then improve his game. That's a scary thought for opponents. I think the Marlins are on the right trajectory. My under the radar storyline I'm really looking at is Otto Lopez and his development, not just as, a stopgap player, but kind of having the idea now and getting accustomed to the idea that Otto Lopez is an above average shortstop with room to grow. And I wasn't always a believer. I mean, I'd hardly heard of him, a year and a half ago, gets DFA'd by the Giants or put on waivers. The Marlins claim him. Okay, let's see what we got. And then you're like, all right, he's got a really good glove at second base. He's a defensive wizard there. And the big question, I know you and I talked about this, was how is he going to follow up his rookie campaign in 2025? Is he still going to be a stalwart defensively? Is he still going to be above average with the bat, or at least adequate with his hit tool? And it was a unique season for Lopez because he started at second base, looked great, then transitions to play shortstop because of Xavier Edwards. They just couldn't keep playing him. And he finishes in the 95th percentile in outs above average, an elite defensive shortstop. And then his hitting, you saw a huge power increase. He hit 15 homers. And you're like, where'd that come from? Got stronger in the weight room. Now the average took a little bit of a dip. He goes back from 270 last year to hitting 246, but you have to look at, there was an element of luck to that. His expecting batting average is in the red. It was 279. So he was making good contact. It was a 3.5 win player when you pair his defense, his speed, because he can steal some bases, the power increase. I think we're looking at a situation in 2026 where Otto Lopez, if he continues to improve, he might solidify himself as the shortstop of the future, at least the foreseeable future, because that's an above average player with 20 home run potential.
Yeah, and I know that the biggest gap between his expected stats and the actual results came in the slugging department as well. There's that gap in batting average is even more pronounced when it comes to slugging. A lot of deep fly balls that turned into outs that in other circumstances may have been extra base hits. One of the big observations from last spring training was that he was even stronger than before. He is the biggest biceps on the entire team. He was always in good shape, but it looked like he took his fitness even up a level. And once the dust settled, I guess it did go up a little bit, but really the quality of contact itself was even better. Not necessarily that it blows your mind at the top end with his exit velocities, but like that 90th percentile, when he really squares a ball up, he can do that at a pretty frequently, for especially relative to other guys at his position at shortstop, or whether he moves to second base, move there and at some point in 2026. So yeah, that is such a big pickup. I think generally speaking, people have done an okay job at acknowledging what a big win that was for an organization to essentially get him for nothing and to get him at a point of his career where he's still not even arbitration eligible yet. So that has been a huge win. I could see that. You want me to give you another one, another under the radar
Yeah,
story
let's do it.
that just came to me about the Marlins front office? The potential to add more brain power from outside the organization, specifically to fill the general manager's position, which has been vacant for a couple of years. When Bendix was hired, I think the assumption was that there would be a second in command below him, specifically given that GM title. Instead, he went with 3 assistant GMs, maybe 4 at the onset, and
Yeah,
he
it
has
was a handful.
downsized a little bit. I remember Ozo Campo was one of the original assistant GMs. He has since left. So now it's Gabe Kapler, it's Brian Chadden in those spots. And even Dan Greenlee, I think he was one of the original assistant GMs, and Dan Greenlee has since gone out. Now that's been a couple of years, I am curious, especially in connection with an ownership change of the Tampa Bay Rays. I think some of the executives that he had known from his time there that couldn't originally come over with him when he got the job 2 years ago, that there's going to be more of an availability for those guys if he's interested in bringing them in. There have been a ton of changes already to how they put together that front office and the way that they have organized things. They have this giant collection of directors, all these people that have the director title in different departments, from hitting to pitching to base running to nutrition to travel. They've tried to streamline that stuff, but I still think there could be more people coming from the outside. It's hard to get exact numbers in terms of how much Bruce Sherman has invested in this front office, but they certainly have expanded the number of people involved in these operations. And I think that could continue. So I think that's something to keep an eye out for, even if it hasn't been explicitly reported, that there could still be more additions to come to this front office, and how to really heading into now year 3 of the Bendix era to really put everything together in the way that he originally envisioned.
And speaking of the Peter Bendix era, it's a perfect transition because coming up next, we're going to give our opinions on what he has to do this offseason in order to be successful. I think this is the biggest offseason of his tenure with the Marlins so far, and that's coming up right after this. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. You pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel is great because it gives you so many ways to play. You can build parlays, try player props, money line bets, and even follow the live lines during the games. It makes watching football so much more exciting when you've got a little something, financially riding on the action. So whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? If you're interested, visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. And remember, your first $5 bet, if it wins, it'll get you $300 back in bonus bets. Back here with Ely Sussman from Fish on First. Special episode. We're talking about Peter Bendix and the rest of the front office and this offseason. We've hit the offseason. I know postseason baseball is on right now. Excited to watch it later. And the Marlins, their goal is to get back to the postseason because, Eli, I don't think there's anything like postseason baseball. It's got a type of energy and excitement that you just don't find in the regular season. And I can't wait for the Marlins to get there.
Yeah, somebody that grew up a Yankees fan in New York and was spoiled as much as you can be in terms of making deep playoff runs. It's epic. And I get reminded of that this year, where no matter where the game is being played as we're in the division series round, the atmosphere in those ballparks is next level, the way that fans get into it. And honestly, just from watching at home, it's just a next level of the fact that every single decision gets microanalyzed as much as it does. The stakes there are certain games during the course of the regular season that have a playoff atmosphere, it feels like, but to really see it, especially at this particular time of year, I'm I'm really grateful, and it's something that definitely that Lone Depot Park hasn't even had yet since it opened up. Not how it's had World Baseball Classic, hasn't had Major League postseason. It is overdue for a little taste of that.
So let's talk about what Peter Bendix has to do this offseason to get the Marlins to get that home playoff game and Lone Depot Park to experience that atmosphere. So first off, the floor is yours. Do you have any hot takes that Peter Bendix has to do this, and if he doesn't, it's a failure, an objective failure in your mind?
Mm. I do think he has to add some sort of position player talent to this major league roster. As much as the current guys overachieved, I think it's whether it's free agency, it doesn't have to be a major league free agent deal. It could be a trade, but it has to be somebody, some sort of veteran, established hitter, regardless of position. There's so many ways that they could check that box, but it's something they didn't do last year. The one free agent that they brought in on the position player side, which as borderline a free agent signing as you could get with Eric Wagaman, who was technically a split contract, and he ends up spending the year in the big leagues. But that's all they did on the hitting side. Entering the year, they end up having this good year in spite of not really making any effort whatsoever to bring in somebody with a substantial track record on the position player side. I know from your previous episode, you talked a bit about first base and that being a pretty obvious hole because fortunately, Wagaman did not adequately fill that position despite getting a whole lot of playing time there to prove himself. So that seems like the most direct way. It's just that across this roster, there's only a few guys that I think are locked into one particular position. You touched on Otto in the previous segment. He's going to be almost certainly at shortstop, and you have X at second base. You have Jacob Marcy in center field, and you have prospects on the verge of coming up at different spots, most notably Joe Mack at catcher, but he's not there yet. And I think the discourse I've been seeing from Marlins fans in light of this season is an excitement about all the young guys on the hitting side that are under club control and that had promising rookie years and can only get better. But that's not really being content with that isn't the mindset that teams should have if they're very serious about making the postseason. You want to ideally you want to have an organization where you have major league quality players in AAA that are waiting when inevitably somebody gets hurt or when somebody inevitably struggles more than you could have possibly forecasted. And to me, there's still room to do that. There are guys that even if they perform decently in 2025, they have minor league options. So in anticipation of injuries or sophomore slumps in various ways, you can make the case to add at a lot of different spots if you want to, if the price is right. And yeah, to me, to continue to raise the ceiling of the offense, which I think has a decent floor. You have a lot of guys that have good approaches, especially relative to what we saw in 2024. This team was well prepared in terms of being able to be disciplined and draw their walks more so than they did previously. But I just finished looking at a whole compilation of the home runs for the season. And I realized, this team hit basically the same number of home runs that they did in 2024 when they were an 100-loss team. So that is the most obvious particular skill that they could still use more from the power department. So adding power in whatever spot they're able to do so efficiently, they have so much payroll flexibility, even heading into this offseason with as much money to spend as any team, considering how few commitments are actually on the books. They got to add power in some spot on this major league roster, in my opinion.
Yeah, power is the biggest need on this team. And I tie it into first base because typically that's a power hitting position. And the Marlins didn't get a lot of power. I know Troy Johnston, I think he proved he's a major leaguer, but I wouldn't classify him as an everyday power hitter. Wagaman, there were ups and downs. The majority, it was more bad than good. Wagaman hardly hits for power. So that's why I did this breakdown on the first base free agent market. And I was looking at a guy like, Josh Naylor, who is a pipe dream to me because I realistically don't see this team making the move, but that would be the splash signing you should go after. For me, Peter Bendix, yes, he needs to add, but he also needs to add by not subtracting, if that makes sense. And I'm referring to the pitching staff. Edward Cabrera and Sandy Alcantara. Both those guys, their names were on MLB Network every single day in mid-July. Will they get traded? Oh, it's a foregone conclusion one of them's going to get traded. Sandy's good as gone. And you're like, well, where are they going to? What's the offer? All this speculation, only for the trade deadline to come and go, and they're still on the Marlins. And Sandy's thrilled about it. At that point, the Marlins were sitting around 500. Edward was pitching great up until the injury, so he had to wait a couple weeks to get back. But now in this offseason, there's inevitably going to be this discourse once again. We're going to approach the winter meetings. Will the Marlins trade Sandy Alcantara? We're going to start. I mean, I'm already seeing it, Eli. I went on MLB Trade Rumors yesterday or this morning, and there's already articles out. Ooh, a potential Sandy Alcantara trade to the Yankees. Can we let the season finish first? Can we let the World Series play out before we start talking about the Marlins selling their guys again? Because for me, if Peter Bendix trades Sandy and trades Cabrera or one of them, let's just assume one of them, then you're putting a huge dent in your opportunity to compete in 2026. Huge dent. And it's signifying to the fan base, we're still not ready and we don't believe we can win. Keep them and build around them. You can trade from other aspects of the team, not your big three.
I see it. To me, I'm still going to give them I'm going to brace myself for a particular situation where maybe it makes sense. I do put myself in the mindset from last offseason and how I think you were aligned with me on this, how the timing of the Luzardo trade last offseason was very frustrating. The return that they got was very underwhelming. They sold very low on him, and imagine how much even brighter their rotation outlook would look right now if they'd simply stood pat and let him reestablish himself. So that was frustrating. And especially now that this team you think is significantly closer to actually being competitive, that the one guy that is on the shortest, I guess his window is a little bit shorter than the others, is Sandy, just because of his contract, where it's this one final guaranteed year, and that's $21 million next season, which is going to be a very reasonable amount if he's simply durable and closer to his career norms entering next year. At the same time, we just have not seen the Marlins pay a player $21 million in a single season before. And if they feel like there's a lot of confidence in the arms that are knocking on the door behind him, and if they are willing to spend that money and chop it up between a couple different players, like I could see a situation where it makes a little bit more sense. But to me, I still don't have a great feel in terms of what his trade value actually is, just because of the overall numbers last season being underwhelming, and the fact that he's the guy that so much of his value is about volume of his workload, not rather than as a guy that doesn't miss a ton of bats as you would expect given his pure stuff. Yeah, I see where you're going with that. And I'll go back to the fact that there really isn't an excuse that they have to unload any particular player, even Sandy, because of how low their payroll is. It was the lowest in baseball this past season, and they even unloaded some guys during the course of the year that were due for arbitration raises. So they do it has to be a pure baseball move if they are going to do something like that. And yeah, even if it is a pure baseball move, there's definitely going to be some mixed reactions to it. I want to take a moment just to amend my previous response where I talked about the Marlins lacking power and needing power. I didn't mention Kyle Stowers. Guys, I do know that Kyle Stowers is here and that he's going to be playing every day, presumably in left field, either in left and right. So I want to amend that and point out that they do still have room to add around him, though, in that particular department. As I think about other potential needs that have to be done this offseason, one way or the other, yeah, I can't say that he needs to sign any particular player to a contract extension. But I did mention Eury before as a guy that I think could be on the cusp of taking a pretty big leap forward. And that's a guy that is on such a fast track to reach free agency at such a young age that he's the guy that fits the prototype for an extension candidate if they do have anybody in this organization right now, in order to buy out a few years. So if the opportunity is there for him, if there's any back and forth with somebody like him on a type of deal, there's almost no number that would really scare me in terms of what it should take to sign him moving forward, just because I think his ceiling is going to be, it's so difficult to find it. They found it was really improbable that they were able to get somebody like this for $200,000 as an international free agent. And it's just so rare to be able to get somebody like that has the ceiling to not only pound the strike zone, but actually miss bats in several different ways. So yeah, I wouldn't say that's a necessity, but that's the guy that if they do extend anybody, like to me, he is the number one priority to try to get that done. Yeah, other than that, I would have to say that yeah, otherwise I think you got it covered though, in terms of what you mentioned. But,
Uh, Going
not
back
to
to Eury Perez real quickly, if you have an opportunity to lock him up long term, you have to. And it would be organizational malpractice if you have a deal on the table and it gets pulled for financial concerns because he's worth big money. The issue I see the Marlins running into with the Eury extension, and I'll make this quick, is that I don't know if Eury Perez is willing to take an extension right now because his talent is so darn good and his ceiling's so high. You look at possible contract extensions, he might say, you know what, I'm gonna wait it out a couple more years and then break the bank and get a Yoshinobu Yamamoto type contract, if not higher than that. Because of his age, he's so young, he can sign a 10+ year deal in pure free agency. So that is something to take an eye on. But I agree with you 100%, Eli. If the Marlins can sign Eury to an extension, then I'm going to come on this podcast and be absolutely ecstatic and sing Bendix and sing Sherman's praises because they will have earned it. And that's a sign of commitment right there, something we haven't seen in a while. But we're almost out of time on the show. I did want to in the next segment, talk about this pitching staff quickly. There's a lot of options that the Marlins can go with in regards to their starting rotation. So that's coming up right after this. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. And I know I'm busy. I don't have a ton of time to dedicate to organizing my finances. So that's why Monarch does the heavy lifting. You will get clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and you'll feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. If you like saving money, who doesn't like saving money? Monarch is going to help maximize those investments and increase that savings rate. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONMLB. Final segment here on today's show with Ely Sussman. The pitching staff, Eli. A lot of options to talk about. Unless the Marlins break the conventional wisdom that baseball has in place for the last 100 years or so, they're going to run out a rotation. They're not going to be the Tampa Bay Rays and throw opener after opener. And we're going to need 5 guys to fill out that starting rotation. Who do you project, in early October that the 5 guys will be, assuming health is not a concern?
It starts with Sandy and Eury, then Eddie, Ryan Weathers, and now Jansen Junk. Jansen Junk is the one guy that doesn't have any minor league options, and that kind of gives him the inside track of making the roster in some form or fashion. That doesn't force him to actually win a rotation spot. But in terms of the 5 that, in my mind, I think are most likely to come together in a group that I can get around, I think Junk at this moment is the one that I think he's going to start off in the number 5 spot, and he'll have to pitch his ass off in order to keep that spot because there's a lot of guys in the mix right behind him.
See, I would have no qualms with that rotation. I think Junk, his control is so elite. He's a pitcher you want to have in your building. I mean, I think he can honestly get better and take strides forward, which will be his second full year in the Marlins organization. And you have Bill Hazel and Daniel Moskos. I know they're always working to improve their pitchers. Specifically, this organization develops pitchers really among the best if you compare them to other teams. I wonder about Braxton Garrett, because the word on the street is Garrett's coming back healthy. He's not going to have a limited offseason in terms of throwing or his workout routine. He feels good. They've been very cautious with him, obviously going back to 2024, missed all of 2025. And I think Garrett is flying under the radar because 2023 Braxton Garrett was really, really good. Like really good. I forgot just how good the numbers were, but he was a workhorse and he was effective. He missed bats for a pitcher that doesn't throw as hard as, Eury or Sandy. You'd think he would be more of a pitch to contact guy, but in 2023, I mean, he averaged just about a strikeout an inning, So for Braxton Garrett, I think it's all going to depend on his Grapefruit League performance and then ultimately the metrics and what the fastball movement says, what his curve looks like. And if the organization feels like, this guy is back to being completely healthy, then he has a higher ceiling than Jansen Junk does as the fifth starter. The question is, how will his arm respond to a major surgery like that?
Right. And to me, I actually see him pretty comparable to Junk in the way that command is such a big ingredient with him. Because Junk, by some measures, had about as good a command year as anybody could possibly have. It's just that he got hit very hard when he was a little bit off with his location. And with Garrett, it was at his best, it was also pretty impressive commands and not getting hit quite as hard, even when he missed his spots. So he has one thing that I'm sure this organization is going to like about him coming back is how deep his pitch mix is, where there is a sinker and a four seamer, the slider that took such a big step forward, and he still has an occasional curveball, change up on top of that. That's something that I know this pitching development group really values, is having as many pitches as possible that you can use and that you can throw for strikes. It has been a pretty long layoff, where it was early in that 2024 season, the last time that we saw him. And it's now his second major elbow surgery that he's had. The first one being when he was still really early on in the minors. Amazingly, he still has a minor league option left, even though he's played parts of 5 major league seasons already. So I'm not counting him out as a guy that could have a big impact as the year goes on. But I'm just, I lean towards, if you're looking at between somebody like him and Junk, where both of them have a similar playbook when things are going right, I'm going to lean towards the guy that was just doing it at the end of this previous season versus the one that is further removed from putting it all together. So I just see that I kind of am going to have very limited expectations initially for him just because of the long layoff, but I hope I'm proven wrong, and I hope he kind of jumps back right into what he was during that 2023 season.
And really quickly before we end today's episode, Max Meyer, I'm of the opinion his days as a starting pitcher on the Marlins are over. I don't see a path back to, being a staple or given an opportunity to start games. I think we know what he is. He's an inconsistent starter that doesn't have the arsenal required to start. He has an elite slider, and that's it. The fastball is flat, no movement. The changeup, inconsistent. I know he worked hard on it, but he never became that, effective 3-pitch guy the Marlins envisioned when they took him out of Minnesota. Unfortunately, the pundits were wrong, or were right rather. He looks more like a bullpen arm to me. And now health is a major concern. And the X factor as well with this is Robbie Snelling, who I believe could be in the rotation, or could have been in the rotation the back half of September. He looks really, really good. when he's ready to go and service time isn't an issue, I think he's going to force his spot in this rotation. And that's going to create, again, like the three guys, Jansen Junk, possibly Garrett, and then Snelling, all competing for one spot, assuming health is still in play.
Absolutely. And what I loved about what they did with Snelling this year is really stretch out his workload in a way that he's going to be fully available next year. He is in a position where he can make 30 starts next season and maybe even still have something left in the tank for October beyond that if they make it to October. So I agree with the direction that this is headed in, that he's going to spend the majority of the year in the rotation. I think when he comes up that he's going to stick around in some form or fashion. And that is a great problem to have. So it's further away where we see the potential of Thomas White to join the mix also. But Snelling in particular, that they set him up so well to make a big impact in 2026 because of how many innings he was able to pitch. Part of that was credit to him with how efficient he was pitch count wise to be able to get all those up downs in the course of his minor league games because he was in such an efficient spot. And that is such a big success story among several others that we kind of touched on loosely here. The way that he has essentially totally regained the prospect, all the measurables that he had just a couple of years ago when he was as good as any minor league pitcher in baseball. And he bounced right back into that conversation here in 2025 with stuff that just took a step forward compared to where it had previously been. So that is a huge win to get a guy that adding him to the mix, trading a rental reliever and having him as the headliner of that package coming back. That's where you see those moves adding up to give them a chance of actually being contenders in 2026. He'll be right in the middle of that.
I'm excited. I can't wait. We'll end it here. Eli, I want to thank you once again for coming on the show. It's always great to talk some Marlins baseball at a good in-depth level with you. So thank you.
Happy to be on. Looking forward to being back in the future and can't wait to see your on the ground coverage from the fall league coming up over this next month or so.
That's going to wrap it up here, guys. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe, stay locked on, and let's go fish.